Welcome to this special class on Unacademy YouTube platform. Today we will be continuing with our General Studies General Essay classes. As you can see, in the last 12 classes or so, we have discussed all aspects of your General Studies answer writing, from polity and governance to social issues to economy to ethics, case studies, public administration, and essays. Before starting the class today, let us look at the courses offered by Unacademy on its platform. What are the courses offered by Unacademy on Unacademy platform? Let us look at the courses that are starting on Unacademy platform. You can see that here Unacademy has got excellent results this year. They have got excellent results this year, including second rank. Got excellent results this year, including the second rank, and then the 9th rank, 10th rank, 13th, 14th, 16th, and 20th. And if you include our ranks also, including 15th rank also, because now that I am also part of Unacademy, 15th rank also is part of Unacademy ranks only. So, in Unacademy platform, there are 7 ranks between 1 and 20, 20 ranks between 21 and 100, and 143 ranks between 101 and 761, which is a very good result for any institution. Proceeding further, here all the top ranks given, including their names, are given here. You can see them, all those top ranks. Then moving on, what is expected to crack this examination? What needs to be done, and what is Unacademy offering to you? What needs to be done and what Unacademy is offering to you? You can see here that what is required is guidance from top educators, and you have all the country's top educators teaching on one single platform. You need comprehensive test series. Unacademy has 100 plus test series. High quality reading material. Of course, the reading material is of a top quality, which you can see for yourself also. Then what you can see is the doubt clearing session, because the students will have lots of doubts and they need to clear their doubts, which is part of the classes, as well as answer writing. And comprehensive coverage of the entire current affairs. Unacademy has Articulate magazine, wherein all these current affairs are covered comprehensively. Then what are the courses that are offered? 9 months combo to crack Civil Services Prelims 2021-2022 from October to June. And you have attractive offers also here, 28% off with optional, and 10% additional discount by referring to our code PKS10. If you refer to our code, you will get 10% more discount also, and introductory price discount, 10% discount. So it comes to very less compared to what you find in physical classrooms, wherein the course fee runs into lakhs of reports. Definitely, this is all about democratizing education. Then you have one subscription to crack it all: GS plus optional plus iconic GS plus optional. One subscription. 25% with optional and 10% with referral code. As I said, you can get 25% discount with optional. On top of it, you also get 10 more percent discount with a referral code. Our referral code, as I mentioned earlier, is PKS10. PKS10. You will get 10% more discount. You can see the prices: 1 year and 2 years. You can see the prices also 1 year and 2 years. Then you have the test series combo, optional test series. Then prelims and mains test series. You can see the combination here worth 45,000 rupees. Free, this entire is free with 1 year and above combo subscription. This is what you can say. This icing on the cake. That's what we say. Then you have 3 months of festival combo also. This is the period where the 3 months, next 3 months are going to be a period of festivals. So you will also get a festival combo also. And this offer is valid only till 20th October. That is day after tomorrow. So hurry and make use of this offers on Unacademy platform. You can see all top educators on Unacademy platform here. Right? All top educators are here on Unacademy platform for optional. Then your new batches, as I said, will be starting from 20th October. All the new batches will be starting from 20th October. All these new batches. Then there are 3 different types of batches you can see here. One is for next year 2022. Then 2023 2 years. And this Mission AIR 1 batch, which is very important. Mission AIR 1 batch for this year mains. Who wants to be number 1? You can see there. I'll also be teaching there as part of this Mission AIR batch. I'll be taking up ethics classes there. And you can join all of them. This Mission AIR batch started from 18th of October. That is today itself it is starting. Again, you can take admission for all these batches by quoting our referral code PKS10. Then as I mentioned, you have all other batches also. All other batches, 1 year, 2 year programs, as you can see here. Then comprehensive batch for 2022. You can see all the top educators, both English medium, Hindi medium, as well as bilingual batches also. Right? Then you also have 2 year batches for this examination, 2 years, because this examination is a very long run process. You need continuous mentoring, and that is what the objective of these 2 year batches also. Then this is the comprehensive batch for 2023. You can take admission again by quoting our referral code PKS10, and it starts on 20th October. Right? Then UPSC Mega Combat. This is also another important, very attractive program on Unacademy platform, which is starting from 24th October. Right? So this is what Unacademy is offering. Live mentoring program also. You have a mentor who is there to help you, support you all through your journey. And you have a loan facility by Unacademy also, wherein you don't have to pay any interest, approval within 2 hours, 0 processing charges, and minimal paperwork. So that's more than enough. As they say, as in Unacademy we say, let's crack it. So let us proceed with what we are discussing. As I mentioned, we have to discuss more essays. We have to discuss more essays. So let us take up one very important essay today from the previous year essay papers. This is near jobless growth in India, an anomaly or an outcome of economic reforms. Please remember, the previous essay we have discussed was regarding agriculture, which is very important from your examination point of view. We have discussed agriculture. Now we will be discussing one more topic, which is a burning topic nowadays in India. What we call it as jobless growth. So what does the topic says here? The country is witnessing jobless growth, which is a fact, which all of us have to accept it. Is it an anomaly or is it an outcome of economic reforms? As you can see, the topic is highly, what you can say, controversial. It is highly controversial. It is highly thought-provoking. So you should not fall into the trap of either too severe criticism or complete rejection. What is required is a balanced view. How do we start with this? This topic becomes much more important from the present day situations. Why? Because what the country has witnessed after the corona crisis was this complete jobless growth. It was said that 9 crore people have lost jobs in India. On top of it, India has mostly informal labor. Formal sector employment is also very less. 9 crore people had lost jobs in India due to corona crisis, and what we call it as jobless growth. And as we mentioned, what we can see in the last 1.5 years of corona is what we called it as a K-shaped growth. That means definitely there is a revival of economic activity. There is revival of economic activity in the form of either increase in the GDP, in the form of increase in tax revenues, in the form of increase in GST collections. But the problem is that whatever the growth that is taking place, it is taking place and it is only taking place for rich and powerful sections of society. Rich people are becoming richer and poor people poorer. On the one hand, rich people are becoming richer. You can see in the last 18 months also how the incomes of both Ambani and Adani have increased. In the last 1 month also we have seen huge amount of demand for these automobiles, vehicles, which clearly show that rich people are having enough amount of money, but at the same time the country is witnessing huge amount of loss in employment. Around 9 crore people have lost jobs. And before in 2019 itself, it was pointed out that the unemployment rate in India is the highest in the last 40 years or so. After 1979, the unemployment rate in India was the highest. What all these statistics clearly show is that definitely the country is witnessing what we call jobless growth. There is no doubt that the country is witnessing jobless growth. The question here is why the country is witnessing jobless growth. What the government is doing, is it because of economic reforms or is it some kind of anomaly in the economic system, and what is the solution? This is what we have to discuss today as part of our topic. As I mentioned, this is very, very important from your General Studies Paper 3 Indian economy point of view also. Why? Because this will be definitely asked in your Indian economy this year, jobless growth. So let us try to find out how this jobless growth is measured. This jobless growth is measured in terms of what we call employment elasticity of growth. This is measured in terms of employment elasticity of growth. What is this employment elasticity of growth that we talk about? What we are saying here is that employment elasticity of growth means for every 1% increase in the GDP, What is the increase in the employment rate? That is what we call employment elasticity of growth. And it has declined during the years of economic reforms. It has come down. It has come down, further coming down. It is not even 0.3% at this point of time. That means for every 1% increase in the GDP, employment is going only by 0.3%. Obviously, which clearly shows jobless growth. When do you say job-led growth? When do we say job-led growth? We say it as job-led growth when increase in GDP 1%, increase in employment 2%. That is what we call job-led growth, or at least 1%. Both of them are going up in the same proportion. But in India, what we are witnessing is this jobless growth. Now the question is why? Let us look at all the reasons for jobless growth. There we will talk about economic reforms and everything else. Historical factors. As we study, we have to talk about this issue from all dimensions, starting with historical dimension. What are the historical factors that have contributed to this jobless growth? What are the historical factors? It was definitely the British rule in India. Before Britishers entered into our country, as we keep on saying, India was the most developed country in the world. Right now, we say that America is the most powerful country in the world. Why? Because of America's contribution to global GDP and global trade, which is hovering around 25%. In those days, we're talking about the 17th century, before the Britishers had entered into India. In those days, our contribution to GDP, global GDP and global trade was more than 30%. It was more than 30%. During the time of Akbar, India was the richest country in the world, and Akbar was the richest person in the world. Then what happened? After the Britishers had come to India, what they have done is they have come to India as a traders, but over a period of time, they have occupied India. They have occupied the country. And what did they do? They realized the fact that India can be ruthlessly exploited only when they break the strength of India. What was the strength of India at that point of time? The rural economy, rural artisans. Indian products were extremely popular all over the world at that point of time. And 1750 was the period when the first phase of industrial revolution took place. By the time Britishers had firmly established themselves in India by 1750s. They had firmly established themselves in India. And this was the time also India was experiencing a lot of political uncertainty after the death of Aurangzeb in 1707. And they ruthlessly exploited lack of unity among Indians. They started occupying one province after the other province, starting with Bengal province and all other provinces. They started ruthlessly exploiting all these things. Then what did they do? They had realized that they had to break the backbone of Indian economy. What did they do? They destroyed the handloom industries in India. Our handloom products were popular all over the world at that point of time, including in United Kingdom. Because our rural artisans, they were so efficient that in London at that point of time, the rich people in London, it was a status symbol for them to carry or to wear Indian dresses at that point of time. That was the kind of popularity that we had our production. Along with agriculture, the industry was also flourishing in India at that point of time, thanks to the political stability provided by the Mughal Empire. Then what happened? 1750s, the first phase of industrial revolution took place in United Kingdom. This power loom had come in place of handloom. As we know, the initial phase of industrial revolution took place in this cotton and textile industries. By this time, Britishers had firmly established themselves in India. What did they do? They knew that unless they break the backbone of Indian economy, they would not be able to conquer the country. So what did they do? They had imposed huge amount of tariffs on Indian products. On top of it, they have destroyed the handloom industry in India. All these rural artisans, they were given strict punishment if they were to produce those products. Their handlooms were destroyed. They were beaten. They were killed also. This is what Britishers have done. This is what they have done. So the entire rural economy was completely destroyed. Rural industrialization had become a thing of the past. This continued for 100 years till the second phase of industrial revolution in 1950s. By this time, what was the outcome? The outcome was that our rural economy started expressing a lot of distress because of the fact that all these other professions in rural areas had become almost non-existent. What happened? All those people, they had no option but to turn to agriculture. And Britishers have encouraged this indigo cultivation because there was huge amount of demand. So all those people were forced to take up jobs in agriculture. Suddenly agriculture started witnessing what we call disguised unemployment. What is this disguised unemployment? In simple terms, if you are a non-economics student, in simple terms, what is this disguised unemployment? Very simple. In simple terms, if 10 people are needed to work on a particular plot of land, say 1 acre of land, if 10 people are required, 20 people are working on that land. What is the productivity of the remaining 10 people? 0. That means more number of people are working than what it is required. That is the reason why in economics, in technical terms, we call it that the marginal productivity of the labor is equal to 0 in disguised unemployment. This is what the question that was also asked in your prelims examination. This is the question that was asked in your prelims examination also about disguised unemployment. Proceeding further, so what the rural areas witnessed was complete distress. On top of it, the most important thing that we have to talk about here is during this period was Britishers never really bothered to introduce industrial revolution in India. 1750 the first phase, 1850 the second phase. India has missed out on both these revolutions. It has missed out on both these manufacturing revolutions, industrial revolution. So simply India simply could not keep up the pace with the rest of the world. And when this industrial revolution took place in United Kingdom, what did the British do? They have converted India into a colony of the Britishers. This is what we call colonialism. What do we mean by converting India into a colony of the Britishers? What do we mean by that? It simply means that India would export the raw material that is needed for British industries and would import the finished products. Please remember, this was the time India was still the richest country in the world. So Indians had a lot of what we call purchasing power capacity. So Britishers had what we call a ready-made market for India. And India is very, very rich in these natural resources and human resources. And Britishers ruthlessly exploited this. India had become a colony that would export raw material and import finished products. Because India was not independent at that point of time. And on top of it, India also could not benefit out of this modern scientific education. What happened with all these factors combined together is By the time we got independence in 1947, India was one of the poorest countries in the world. By 1947, if you look at it, India's contribution to global GDP and global trade had come down to less than 1% from a very high of 30%. And it was said that in those 250 years of British rule, it was said that Britishers had taken away more than $40 trillion. It was a conservative estimate by economists. They had taken away more than $40 trillion of money from India in those days. $40 trillion. To put this $40 trillion in perspective, present India's GDP is around $2.8 trillion. It is around $2.8 trillion. You can imagine the kind of economic exploitation of the Britishers. So when we talk about this jobless growth, what we have to remember here is this jobless growth in India had its origins during the British times. Historical factors. That is what we have to remember. One, complete destruction of rural industries. Second, failure to introduce manufacturing revolution so that the excess labor from agriculture can be absorbed in manufacturing sector. 3. Absence of skills and education. 4. India becoming a colony of the Britishers, which imported raw material and exported finished products. And 5, as I said, ruthless exploitation by the Britishers. So, continuing with this, if we look at the time of independence, continuing with this, if you look at the time of independence, India had a huge army of unemployed people. At the time of independence, more than 90% of our population was dependent on agriculture. There was no private sector. There was no market. More than 90% was dependent only on agriculture. More than 90% was only dependent on agriculture. We had what we call disguised unemployment in agriculture, wherein people are employed but their productivity is zero. They are employed but their productivity is zero. This is the kind of situation we had. Obviously, our policy makers were confronted with this problem: how to ensure rapid economic growth. How to ensure rapid economic growth. Going by economic theory, at the time of independence, we had two sectors. One is primary sector, consisting of agriculture and allied activities. Other one is the secondary sector or industrial sector. Industry was completely absent. But the productivity of agriculture is very less compared to industrial sector. The terms of trade of agriculture are less compared to industrial sector. What do we mean by that? If I invest 100 rupees in agriculture, I will be getting 105 rupees. That means my profit will be around 5 rupees. On the other hand, if I invest the same 100 rupees in industry, I will be getting 120, 130 rupees. The terms of trade is better for industrial sector. So what did the Jawaharlal Nehru government do after independence? From the second 5-year plan onwards, we have opted for industrial sector. We have opted for large scale industries to ensure rapid economic growth of our country. The government started investing heavily in these large scale industries which are in the public sector. We call them as public sector enterprises. Right? The government started investing heavily in these public sector enterprises. And what is the basic problem here? These public sector enterprises are what we call capital intensive. That means they don't require much labor and they only require skilled labor. Unskilled labor, difficult to find employment there. So what happened? Economic growth was taking place, but it was again what we call jobless growth. It was again what we call jobless growth. Economic growth was taking place, it was jobless growth, and that was the problem. Economic growth was taking place, but the problem was that it was jobless growth. Why? Because most of the economic growth was taking place only in most of the economic growth was taking place only in industrial sector. It was taking place only in industrial sector, wherein public sector enterprises and heavy and large scale industries could not employ good number of people. On the other hand, on the other hand, the problem was agriculture still was suffering. There was still what we call huge amount of huge amount of disguised unemployment in agriculture sector. And another major mistake that was committed during this period, planning period, was the government was focusing only on physical infrastructure. Jawaharlal Nehru, as Prime Minister, he was focusing mostly on physical infrastructure. That is, physical infrastructure in the form of he was focusing mostly on physical infrastructure in the form of industries and irrigation dams, and he felt that that will be more than enough. But unfortunately, that is not the case. The government has completely neglected what we call social infrastructure, education, and health. On top of it, India also entered into the third stage of demographic cycle given by Robert Malthus. We have entered into a stage wherein we have we have entered into a stage wherein we have on the one hand the death rate is coming down thanks to improvements in science and technology and health facilities, and birth rate is also going up. Death rate is coming down, birth rate is also going up, and this is what we have entered. The population was increasing. It was increasing. The country was witnessing a very high growth in population. It was witnessing very high growth rate in population. So, what happened with all these consequences? One, huge amount of population. Second, there was no social sector development. This population never had any kind of skills. They did not have any kind of skills. They don't have any education. Third, industrial sector was not absorbing the additional labor because the focus was mostly on heavy and large scale industries. Fourth, agriculture was suffering from disguised unemployment. All of them have only resulted in what we call jobless growth. Jobless growth. Small scale and cottage industries. The small scale and cottage industries were not given the kind of importance that they should have been given. The small scale and cottage industries. They were not given the kind of importance that they should have been given. And this is where the country faltered on this employment. It was definitely, you can say, not an anomaly. It was the structural weakness of Indian economy, which has continued for a very long period of time, that ultimately was responsible for this jobless growth. Then you can ask me, what happened after 1991? In 1991, Indian economy faced a severe crisis, as all of you know, very serious economic crisis. And these serious economic crisis had forced the government to opt for economic reforms. It has forced the government to opt for economic reforms. And in 1991, economic reforms were implemented. And what is the most important outcome of this economic reforms? The most important outcome of economic reforms was India could come out of what we call this Hindu rate of growth. Around average growth rate during this period of economic reforms was between 1950s and 1990s was around only 3 to 3.5%. Only in 1980s it was around 5.5%, but it could not be sustained because we call it as consumption-led growth. So then, what happened later? Then what happened later? After 1991, Indian economy suddenly started booming. By 2004, we started growing almost at 9% per annum also. Then it should have resulted in more employment. Unfortunately, that is not the case. It did not result in more employment. After 1991 economic reforms also, the country only witnessed what we call jobless growth. You can ask me, when economy growing at 9% per annum, it should be your employment should be going also on a healthy rate. But that was not the case. Why? What is the reason why? It was not growing at 9% per annum. Our jobs were not increasing. Why? Because again, structural anomaly in our Indian economy. What is structural anomaly here that we talk about? After 1991, if you look at the composition of our GDP, the contribution of agriculture sector, primary sector has come down drastically. And the contribution of service sector has increased. Today, if you look at it, service sector is contributing almost 57.5% to our GDP. Agricultural contribution has come down, primary sector to around 13.5%. Remaining is contributed by manufacturing sector. Right? Now, if you look at agriculture and allied activities, it will be around say 16% or 17%. So what is happening here is that we have shifted directly from primary sector to service sector. Our economic growth, our economic development, the path of our economic development has radically shifted from primary sector to service sector. On the other hand, if you look at other countries around the world which had become developed, take the case of countries like United Kingdom, Germany, France, United States of America. All these developed countries, how did they progress? They progressed from primary sector to secondary sector, and from secondary sector to the tertiary sector. And whenever they had a surplus labor in the primary sector, that was absorbed in industrial or manufacturing sector. From there, they moved on to the service sector, so that those countries never had any kind of problem with providing jobs to the people. Those countries always had job-led growth. In India, if you look at it, between 1950s and 1990s, our growth rate was so less that there was no question of any job-led growth. On top of it, it was agriculture that was contributing maximum. Service sector was almost nil, and manufacturing sector was mostly about big capital intensive industries. Big capital intensive industries, manufacturing sector. Now, what happened is that after 1991, we have shifted directly from primary sector to tertiary sector, service sector. What do we mean by that? It means that we have missed out again on manufacturing revolution. Industrial revolution, we have again missed out. Why service sector? Why? Because India has had the advantage of what we call skilled labor. Thanks to our IITs, thanks to our IIMs, we had a skilled manpower which is needed for the service sector. IT revolution. After 1991, the country had witnessed what we call this information technology service sector revolution. The country had witnessed what we call service sector revolution after 1991. This IT revolution, what it had done is that this IT revolution had made sure that again the country would be witnessing only what we call jobless growth, because in the service sector employment potential is very less. I'll just give you an example here to explain these things in a very simple manner. Take the case of an IT company, $1 billion IT company. $1 billion IT company might employ maximum 1 lakh people. 1 lakh people and $1 billion. On the other hand, if you are an iron and steel company, if you are $1 billion, you will be employing at least 2 million people. At least you will be employing 1.5 to 2 million people. That is where to be called job-led growth. In IT sector, what happened is that the wages, the salaries have skyrocketed. The wages and salaries have skyrocketed for very few people, for those 1 lakh people, whereas the rest of the country simply again had to live with what we call this job less growth. So when the service sector started contributing to the GDP of our country, again we are back to the same situation, that is jobless growth. Is it an outcome of economic reforms? May not be, because as I said, the problem with the structural weaknesses of our Indian economy. And what happened? Another important problem here is our demographic bulge has not been transformed into what we call demographic dividend. Demographic bulge has not been transformed into demographic dividend. What do you mean by that? We have witnessed a huge amount of increase in our population in the last 30 years. At present, we have 1.4 billion population, second only to China, and we will be crossing China also in a very short period of time. We will become the what we call we will become the largest country in the world in terms of population in a very short period of time. But can we call this a population human resource? Can we call this demographic bulge as a demographic dividend? Obviously not. Why? Because most of this population do not have the skills to get productive employment. Again, I will give you one more example here. I'll give you one more example here. You take a case of a country like South Korea or a country like United States of America. In South Korea, 98% of the population are skilled population. Whereas if you look at someone like United States of America, also more than 90% of the population is skilled. That means they can get jobs in a private sector, productive employment. In India, in organized sector, when we talk about skilled population, it is only 2%. Rest of them are working in the unorganized sector, informal labor, unskilled population. So we have not been able to transform our demographic bulge into demographic dividend. There is huge demand for skilled personnel. What we say is that there is huge demand for skilled personnel in our industrial sector, in our service sector. But the problem is there is scarcity of supply, because the skilled personnel are not at all available. People don't have the skills. Why they don't have the skills? For the simple reason that the governments, successive governments, have not invested in education. They have not invested in education. Two things, social sector, education and health, have been repeatedly ignored by governments since independence till now. So the problem here is that you have a huge army of unemployed people who are unskilled, who cannot get any productive employment outside in the private sector. On the other hand, Most of the service sector industries are suffering from lack of skilled personnel. So there is huge demand mismatch and supply mismatch in the country, which is resulting in what we call jobless growth. So after economic reforms, what happened? Some people have got jobs. Most of them are what we call unskilled jobs. Most of them have got jobs in this real estate, construction. These economic reforms have witnessed a construction boom in the country in the form of roads, in the form of houses, in the form of buildings, in the form of housing societies, you name it. The country witnessed a real estate boom. And most of this unskilled labor got employment in this construction sector. But unfortunately, it is completely informal. The wages are always decided by the contractors, and there is no safety or security of tenure, and there is no safety at the workplace also. These construction workers are at the mercy of the contractors. Till the corona crisis had struck the country, the governments do not know the exact number of migrant population also. Before that, economic survey had tried to estimate the migrant population in India on the basis of the train journeys, and it was estimated that around 11 crore people. Out of this 11 crore people, you can see that more than 90%, 95% of them are only unskilled labor. So the country is only witnessing what we call jobless growth. It is only witnessing jobless growth. Most of them are competing for lower level unskilled manual jobs. And there is huge amount of demand for skilled personnel at the top level, and there is no supply. And another problem is that our education system. Our education system simply has failed to impart the necessary skills to the people. It has failed to impart the necessary skills to the people so that they can get productive employment. We are still continuing with the Lord Macaulay's education system. When Lord Macaulay had introduced the education system in India, when he had introduced this education system in India, the objective basically was to create an army of clerks to work for India company. So the education system is completely devoid of any of the skills that are needed by the modern economies. This education system simply cannot provide employment to people. It simply cannot provide any employment to people, our education system. And our education system is such that those who come out of colleges and universities simply are not employable. They simply are not employable. That means because they don't have the skills, they cannot get any productive employment outside. So, what is the solution then? In the private sector, they don't get any jobs. We are talking about educated unemployed people. Because the education system is such that you can, when you come out of the colleges and universities, simply you don't get any jobs because you don't have any skills. And what about illiterate people? They are only fit for what we call these uh, manual jobs. And highly skilled population, very less. On top of it, what we witness in our country is also gender discrimination. Women are not allowed to go out and work also, in spite of the fact that we have implemented economic reforms. There are so many reasons, especially in rural areas. Gender also. And then what about the policies of the government? Since independence, the government simply do not have any clear-cut vision or a policy regarding job-led growth. Whenever unemployment is going up, what is the response of the government? To come out with employment generation schemes like NREGA to provide temporary relief from unemployment to people in both in mostly in rural areas. To provide employment to people mostly in rural areas. This is what what we can see as part of you know uh, the policies of the government. The governments are mostly what they are doing is they are mostly only into providing temporary relief from unemployment with these employment generation schemes. They are mostly in providing temporary relief to people from unemployment through employment generation schemes. This is what the government has done. This is what Indira Gandhi has done as part of her Garibi Hatao programs. She had come out with a food for work program wherein the people in rural areas are given employment to earn their livelihood. Later, we had Jawahar Rozgar Yojana. We also had Nehru Rozgar Yojana. And then later we had Pradhana Mantri Rozgar Yojana. Then we had this NRAGA after UPA government came to power. So we had all these what we call so-called employment generation schemes. But do they provide solutions? Obviously not. These employment generation schemes cannot provide solutions. Why? Because they only provide temporary relief from unemployment. Under NREGA, one member of a family is guaranteed 100 days of unskilled labor. What about the rest of the members of the family? What about the remaining 265 days? Simply, the governments do not have any answer. Obviously, this is not the solution, final solution. We have seen all those problems related to unemployment in India: lack of education, lack of skills, absence of manufacturing sector, and dominance of service sector, disguised unemployment in agriculture, mostly informal labor, and absence of completely skilled personnel. We have seen all these problems, because of which the country is experiencing what we call jobless growth, because of which country is experiencing jobless growth. Then what is the solution? After looking at all the problems, we have to talk about the solutions also. What is solution? What is solution to this problem of jobless growth? First and foremost, the government must accept that unemployment is a serious problem. No government since independence has never taken unemployment seriously, because they believe that when people are unemployed and poor, give them subsidies and people will be happy. Give them employment temporarily for a period of 3 months. Give them employment temporarily for a period of 3 months, 100 days of employment through NRAGA, they will be happy. But that is not a solution. What we must remember is that government cannot be a provider of jobs. Government cannot provide employment to the people. What is the solution here is that instead of creating jobs, what the government must be doing is government must create entrepreneurs. The government must create what we call those who can create jobs. Instead of creating employment, the government must create employers. This is what we say. How the government can create employers? First and foremost, education system. National Education Policy 2020 was a right step in this direction. This education policy is trying to come out of what we call this Macaulay's education system and making it much more relevant to the present times. Education policy, education standards, education programs should always be linked to what we call industry. You must produce those skilled personnel who are demanded by industry. That is what you have to do. That is what you have to do as an education policy of the government. The government should always focus on creating employers, impart skills to the people, vocational skills, professional skills. For example, whenever any economy develops, these professionals become very, very important. Who are the professionals that we are talking about? Who are the professionals that we are talking about? We are talking about these electricians, carpenters, then all the professionals who work in households. We need them on a day-to-day basis. Drivers, we need people who do all this day-to-day work, right? And that is where the government should focus on. After 7th standard, after 10th standard, the government should give opportunity for the people to become skilled professional in all these professions: tailors, electricians, carpenters, goldsmith. So these are all professionals. Instead of unnecessarily pursuing graduation, which do not give them any kind of employment, productive employment, which unnecessarily results in only wastage of time. So what is required is the government after 7th or 10th standard should give more importance to this skilled personnel, skilled professions. And this is where we have programs like Skilled India. Once they learned and acquire the skills, what the government should do next is provide them an opportunity to become entrepreneurs, startups. We have this misconception in India that startups means only in the service sector, software industries. That is not the case. You need startups in rural areas. Those skilled personnel in rural areas come out with startups. And let the government provide finances to them as part of Startup India, Stand Up India. Through Make in India, let them produce goods and services and then earn money also. This is what the government should be doing to encourage people to become entrepreneurs on their own. Instead of looking for employment somewhere else, instead of looking for employment somewhere else, what these people should be doing is that they should look for employment for themselves. Another problem with India is that our society is such that we have problem with this dignity of labor. Nobody wants these blue collar jobs. For example, an electrician who can earn easily 30,000 rupees per month by doing small electrical works, we do not want this kind of job. Everyone wants in India what we call white collar jobs. You want to sit under air conditioned room in front of your laptop and work, which is not the case. You take the case of Western countries. What you find in those Western countries is what we call dignity of labor. They are willing to do any work. They are willing to work in in a, a, a waiter in a bar also. Dignity of labor. Indians when they go abroad, they work in petrol pumps and they work in bars also. But in India, you want only the so-called white collar jobs. This is where the problem. We must change the attitudes of our people. We must inculcate what we call dignity of labor among our people. This is what the government should be doing. This is what the government should be doing. Next important thing is identify the sectors which have huge amount of employment potential. What are the sectors which have huge amount of employment potential? Tourism sector. Tourism is definitely one industry which can provide huge amount of employment. Let the government, as usual, provide skills to the people. Let the government develop those tourist areas. The good thing about India is that it has so much of diversity. It has so much of a tourism potential. If at all the government gives a serious importance to this issue, it can provide huge amount of employment to the people. This tourism. It can provide unbelievable employment opportunities to the people. This tourism sector. Unfortunately, neither central nor the state governments have really bothered to develop this tourism sector. They have not really bothered to develop this tourism sector. It can provide huge amount of employment. Next thing the government must do is it should focus on increasing the contribution of the manufacturing sector in GDP from around 17% to 25%. This is the objective of Make in India campaign of the government, but unfortunately, it has not been successful. Recently, as part of Corona crisis, the government had come out with what we call Atmanirbhar Bharat to produce goods in India only, self-reliance. But the government must make sure that this Atmanirbhar Bharat will not degenerate into protectionism. We are living in the age of globalization, so we cannot afford protectionist policies. Next thing is government should do is encourage research and development in the country. That is very, very important. Encouraging research and development so that we can come out with our own entrepreneurs. Startups, unicorns are going up in India, but we are witnessing them only mostly in urban areas, metropolitan cities, but not in rural areas. It should be, it should be what we call extended to two tier and second and third tier cities, and also to rural areas. This is also that should be done by the government to ensure what we call job-led growth. Next thing the government should do is remove unnecessary restrictions on a trade and business in India. Most importantly, the government must implement what we call labor reforms so that we have flexibility in terms of hiring and firing. These are all the measures that should be taken by the government to ensure what we call job-led growth. I think the time is up. We have completed the time and we can stop it here. Hope that you have benefited out of this class. Take care of yourself and best of luck.